right? Because not only has the business survived, but you're meaningfully, deeply engaged with it. With your family members. Like, I don't even talk to my brother. And here you guys are at the head of this awesome legacy company. I'll put a note in the comments. Callie, thank you for coming.
You're
This is
welcome.
so great.
Thank
Oh my
you for
God.
having me.
So I had never heard of Zamzows at all until I moved here, primarily because I got just like Scott's, grass fertilizer.
Sure.
But coming from California, it predominantly wasn't the fertilizer that got your grass brown or green. It was the amount of water. So coming up here, I was like, oh, well, I'll never have to fertilize again. This is great. I'm just going to water the hell out of it. And then it became like a swamp and it didn't turn green, which was really frustrating. So it was like, I was doing the one thing that I thought was right. Then somebody told me, they're like, no, you got to go to Zamzows and get the fertilizer. And
That's
like,
awesome.
what is it? So I go down there and then I realize there's this like obviously different environments, different soil. And you guys have like the multi-stage fertilizer for like the spring, summer, and then fall. And I mean, I've never seen such a robust system to actually keep grass green. Like, did you come up with that on your own, or did you like hire out a scientist or buy out a recipe or what?
Well, my father is he's the mad scientist behind it. And I think our somewhat complex system has a little bit to do, it's like a little bit of a microcosm of my dad, because my dad likes to do things just so, and if there is an extra little phase that'll make it a little bit better, then he's going to add it in there. So that's why there's so many steps and why we go about doing what we're doing, but it is really honed in for our soils. And a funny story about that, when my brother and I were teenagers, because we were old enough to be embarrassed by this. I went to Fairmont Junior High School, and there was this big, I think now they've built over it, but there was, a big field, and you could access it directly from the road. I think it's Northview that you could access it from. Long story short, my dad was testing all of his different formulas. And so at night he would go and he would put down the fertilizer in stripes on the field. So in cover of night, so nobody would see. And then, a couple weeks later, he would get the family in the car. We'd go for a drive and we'd go by and he'd say, okay, I'm going to go by. Tell me which one you think is better. 1, 2, 3. And we would go and look at all the stripes in the lawn. Of course, we were humiliated because it was our school. And we were like, Dad, you can't just do that. But yeah, that's how he tested. He actually literally tested on the Fairmont, on their fields.
Did he ever come clean and be like, hey, listen, by the way, I can tell you how to get your grass like that stripe over there?
No, he never did. And we do laugh about the fact that I'm sure the greenskeepers, that's not what they call them, but whatever, the people that were taking care of the grounds at the school must have been crazy. They were like, why are these stripes in our lawns? We don't get it and we can't fix it. But yeah.
Yeah. And when most people manipulate like public lawn areas, they're like salting it to kill it or something.
Right.
They're like, somebody's coming in here with some serious phosphate and nitrate.
Exactly.
Like, I have no idea what's happening.
Yes. Yeah. It's wild. But he actually started, we have a feed mill. So that when we mill feeds and obviously whatnot at that mill, and all of the ingredients come from the mill. So they're all things that an animal could eat. So it's all safe ingredients, perfectly. So if your dog goes back behind you while you're applying the fertilizer and he's eating it, it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly safe. So that's
very cool.
That's why he had to experiment, because he knew he was going to be using these natural ingredients. He didn't know if they were going to work or not. So he had to try various combinations of feed ingredients to get them to work. So,
did you know that the Fairmont area is actually the origins of the chemtrail conspiracy theory? Specifically because of the lines on the lawn.
Nice.
Could you imagine?
Nice.
Somebody's like, I saw a plane and look at what it did.
This is what happened. I could totally see that.
I think we should start spreading that rumor.
I think so. I think that's great. That's a great idea.
I think you're kind of responsible for like a lot of wasted time on YouTube.
Here's the nice thing. It's not me. It's my dad.
Yeah.
It's him. He's at fault. So I'm clean.
God bless the man.
Our generation is clear.
Oh my God. So I was telling you, so Zamzows has been in business for 90 years and it's still family owned.
Yes.
Okay. So the fact that you've been in business since the 1930s blows my mind, right? Because like we had, what was it, like Hoover Towns and stuff? Like what are those like shanties?
Yeah.
Because like if you think about, that's like when Cinderella Man was filmed. I mean, like portrayed rather.
Right.
Russell Crowe was not back in 1930s, but like the world is so different now than then. And to imagine, like, I'm a small business owner and I have been my entire adult life. And just to imagine having a business that actually brought meaningful value that people were willing to trade money with, to interact with for even 10 years is bonkers, right? Like most businesses don't survive past like year 2, right? And by the 5-year mark, it's something like 75 or 80% of businesses gone. Year 10, it's like 95 are gone. Like, what was that growing up? Right? Because not only has the business survived, but you're meaningfully, deeply engaged with it, with your family members. Like I don't even talk to my brother, and here you guys are at the head of this awesome legacy company.
This podcast is brought to you by MTU Studios. If you're looking to start a podcast or need content for your business or personal use, content of any type, please reach out to MTU Studios. MTUstudios.com. We'd love to help.
Oh man, I don't even know where to begin with that. There's a lot to unpack in that question. I guess so. Let's go back to the fact that it did start in 1933, which is arguably it was the most difficult year of the Depression, the Great Depression. It really was a different time. When my great grandma Zamzow, she and my great grandfather started the business, August. She lived to be 105. So I actually got to know her in my lifetime. And I asked her about that time period and, how difficult it must have been. And she was actually pretty honest to say, it was a little different for us in this particular part of the country because it was not very populated and we grew our own food. And so not a lot changed for them. It did not feel as desperate as it did in, I think, some more populated areas. So in fairness, if you look back on that, we love to talk about how we started in the, depths of it. And, yeah, exactly. But she was very honest in saying, it's not exactly as you might have imagined it, at least in this area it wasn't. So that's not to say that, she said we had no money. Nobody had money, but that was how it was.
Nobody had money like before or after.
Exactly. And we were all, doing our gardens and we were raising our own, meat and all that fun stuff. So, it wasn't that different back then for that. But to start a business when you knew that the economy was what it was, that part is a little bit of a head scratcher for me. I wasn't in the business when Grandma was alive, so I didn't get to ask her that part of it. But that makes me curious because they had to have gone into it knowing like this is dangerous territory. These are not great times to be starting a business. One thing to be keeping up your farm and, raising your children. Another thing entirely to try to sell things to people who have no money. So that had to have been really an interesting time. I can only imagine.
Yeah, but okay. Yes. Right. Like I agree with you, but there are businesses and then there are businesses. Okay. And so like if you went into business and you were like, we're going to make gourmet cookies and it's 1933, it's like, okay, people have an infinite capacity to replace your gourmet cookies with either no cookies, right? Or their own cookies. So that's still a business, right? What Zamzows is though, to me, kind of fundamentally it is part of the thing that enables people to do exactly what you were just saying, which is have food independence. Right. And of course you have other things like beautiful fish and birds and things of that nature. Like you're kind of like the best of like Petco and any home garden center ever, like put together.
Combo.
Yeah. Right. But I would imagine that if like the people that made money in the gold rush were not the gold miners, right? They were the people supplying the things that allowed them to continue existing.
Sure.
So for your family to start a company that was like, hey, we're going to help you grow your own food. We're going to help you continue growing food. We're going to help you grow more food in the same area that you are already growing. We're going to help you feed the animals that are laying your eggs and providing you with meat in the wintertime, things of that nature. That seems to be one of the brightest ideas as far as business, because it's kind of like, okay, look, we're going to help people get the things they absolutely cannot replace in their life, which is food, right? And that's kind of at the core of it. Like we keep animals now very frequently. Like people have hobby farms and stuff, which is super cool, right? Absolutely. Like I know a couple people who have like a couple heads of cattle and, some goats and some other stuff. But 100 years ago, it's like, don't steal my goat because I need this meat and milk and I will absolutely shoot you if you come near my goat. You lose a goat now, you're like, oh my God, Johnny's dead. Like, damn it.
Exactly.
It's like, it's not like I didn't even like Johnny. It's like $150, whatever. I'll go get another goat.
You weren't going to eat Johnny probably either. You were probably using Johnny for other reasons.
Right. I was entertaining my toddlers, whatever. And Johnny got spicy one time, so I'm not that sad.
Right.
you know, but again, that's one of the things that it's Zamzows, I've always suspected had a far different role in people's life than it does now, which is like, oh, I need my 3-stage like grass fertilizer.
Sure. Sure. And I think that that's probably why we're still in business, is that as we have grown and changed, we've changed alongside the growth of the valley and the people who come in and are experiencing the valley for the first time. We help them be successful living here. So I think, and we've done that through various phases. We've carried all sorts of things through the years that now, like, really, it's like coal. We used to be big coal when everybody had coal furnaces. We were big coal. And Dad can tell great stories about delivering coal and, all the coal era. That was what kept us going through that particular period. We actually had gas tanks, so people could come and fuel their cars up at our Fairview store for a while. So like we have morphed and kind of been lots of things. We were a paint store for a while. Like you could come and choose your paint colors and we'd mix it up for you. And so we've been a lot of things over the years. And just as the valley has grown, we've been there for, to provide various needs. And then when it didn't make sense anymore, we switched to something else. There've been some mainstays, obviously, and the lawn and garden and the feed, that's been there from the very beginning. So we're true to that part, and that's probably it is the bread and butter of what we do. But we're also flexible to change as is needed, and for people who, especially now, it's not less. It used to be just the growth in general of people who were here and just growing families. But now we have people coming in from elsewhere, and now we're really valuable because people cannot figure out our soils. So
Right.
That's probably been our biggest. We've been helpful in that area, I think, for a few people.
Okay, so I'm very curious about this because changing what a business does or is oriented towards is a feat in itself.
Oh yeah.
But doing it with people that you're related to has got to be like how could you this is the classic downfall of any corporation, right? Like somebody says we got to pivot, somebody says we got to stay, somebody says we got to pivot a different way. You have 3 different valuable and equal opinions. Was there like one driving individual that got everybody oriented properly to make these pivots?
Each generation has had, it's been interesting. I guess when you ask that question, it's kind of interesting to think back on that. So great grandma and grandpa started it, and great grandma outlived my great grandfather by decades. So she gets a lot of credit, but she was raising a family. They had 6 kids. They lost one of them in the Spanish flu. And then she had 5 others. And so she helped in the business, but she wasn't running the business. Great grandpa was the one running the business. And then they had 5 children. Like I said, one passed away, 6 children, one passed away. And the 2 sons are really the ones who rose. And I don't know, again, nobody's alive to ask them this question, but the women weren't involved. So I don't know if that was just a thing at the times, like women just didn't do that. I'm guessing that was probably it. But the women weren't involved, and the 2 brothers took it over. And then my grandfather was really, they both had their positions and what they did, but my grandfather was really more driven in the business than his brother was. So that determined then the buyout. So when it got time to transfer the business, my grandfather ended up buying out his brother, and he then had the business from there. And he then was the one who drove things at that particular time. So, and grandpa was gardening more than anything. So a lot of the things that are tried and true in this valley with the soil and gardening in particular came from my grandfather. So 2nd generation. So he was the driver in that generation, and he drove a lot of the gardening stuff.
So, there's that show Succession.
Oh my God, I love Succession.
Yet another show that I got 5-6 episodes into. I'm like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like it's just.
Try to be in a family business. It's so hard to watch when you are in a family business because it's exaggerated, but there are some accuracies that are painful.
Oh, I can only imagine, right? So again, okay. My dad is a physician, and he told me when I was a little kid, he's like, listen to me. Out of all of the kids, I want you to know you would be the best doctor. And I was like, really? He's like, oh yeah. And he really wanted me to be an orthopedic surgeon. He's like, listen, you like you like architecture, you like engineering, you like putting things together, you would not believe the things that people can do with like broken bones. And to me, I was literally thinking like you just put a bone back together. But like I think he was trying to
Little super
emphasize,
glue.
yeah, like with screws, I don't know, because I'm not an orthopedic surgeon.
Right.
Like I don't know what the hell it is they do, right? And I was like, oh, well, thanks. Like kind of like
Yeah.
little feather in my cap, right?
Absolutely.
Like anything happened. I come to find out he told all of us this,
Mm.
like individually. And he was just really, he's very taken by his occupation, and he's an incredible physician. He's an incredible surgeon, and he's still practicing. He's 71 and he loves it. And to even to convince one of his kids to go into medicine turned out to apparently be impossible because nobody took it up.
I was going to ask you that question.
He even tried with the in-laws. Like he told my brother-in-law, he's like, Randy, let me tell you, you'd be the best. And Randy's like, I have a master's in mechanical engineering. Like I work for Boeing. He's like, there's always time, Randy.
Oh, that's great.
So when you're talking about how your family is like your great grandfather, then and then your grandfather, and then your father, and now you and your brother, it's kind of like what was it about this line of work that one didn't turn you off immediately as a kid? Because a lot of times the things like if my sons see me edit a podcast, I can't imagine that they'd be like, wow, whereas I'm wholly engrossed in what I'm doing. And I think it's super awesome. And I'm moving like really fast. And it's like all of these different things. And I think most people are like that. Like they go to like bring your kid to work day. You're like, this is the most boring shit ever. Like, so
Yeah.
what was it for you that you saw this as now the fourth generation, and obviously it appealed to something really deeply in you?
Oh boy, I think you're waxing poetic here. It really wasn't that way for me. I think that
Fake news.
Fake news is right. I actually tried pretty hard not to be involved with the family businesses. But okay, so briefly, I'll tell you a little bit about my story. So, I went to school. I wanted to be a veterinarian. So that was what I wanted to do. So kind of along the lines, but
Sure.
it was going to be my own thing, and I was going to have my own clinic, and so I had all these ideas of grandeur.
I don't think that's that like you could still, there's always time.
There's always time. Just
There's
ask your
always
dad.
time.
I'm doing it. That's it.
I'm doing it. I'm leaving right after this.
That's it.
And probably after next week.
Exactly.
All right.
So yeah, so I wanted that, and so I got my degree in biology, pre-vet medicine, and then began the application process into vet school, and then during that time, because you have to kind of stay in academia, I did some graduate work in microbiology. That was way too much lab time and not enough people time. So I realized I didn't want to be doing that. But I continued to apply, continued to get rejected. And so the decision was made for me when after 3 years, I was like, I've got to get on with my life. Like I can't do this anymore. So then I'm like, all right, well, I'm ditching all of it. And I went to work for Merrill Lynch, and I became a stockbroker. And that was right at 9/11. Like it was like, I think I worked 1 year before 9/11 happened. And I realized I can't have how good my day is be determined by this ticker tape. You know, this is too much. I can't, it was way too difficult. And it didn't fit my personality. It was not my jam. So left there. And then I was like, now what am I going to do? And my dad was like, you ought to just consider. And we have a couple of different businesses. So there's a manufacturing division, and we kind of market directly to wholesale users.
Like B2B.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. So long story short, he said, just apply. And of course I did. I had applied to the person who was running that division at the time, and surprise, I got the job.
No.
Marketing director. So I started doing marketing. Well, turns out I love marketing. I was like, this is what I should have gotten my degree in. Like, this is what I love. So I was dabbling in that, but in a very quick amount of time, very short amount of time. When you're in a family business, you have a tendency to like, whether you want to or not, rise to leadership. Like, it's really hard to just work in the business and not be
punch the clock and go home.
Right. Exactly. And of course, dad is in my ear constantly. And my brother was in the business at that point too. He was in a same company, but different division. He was in the manufacturing of the fertilizer end. So he was chirping at me. And anyway, long story short, I ended up pretty quickly running that division. Like we got to that point and I was running that division. And I did that for quite some time before fairly recently. I think it was probably 6 years ago. My dad came to my brother and I and said, okay, we've got these Zamzows stores and we got to figure out what we're going to do with them. and I think we need some new leadership, and I think you guys should come over and do this. But I hope he doesn't mind me telling you this, but he said to us, I want you to start attending meetings. Just go over. Now, remember, we're working in a totally different company. It's a Zamzow owned company, but they're separate. They're owned separately, have different ownerships and everything. So my brother and I were like, well, how do we just start attending meetings? And he's like, well, you're a family member. So you just go over there and you just start attending meetings.
You just go over there.
We're like, Dad, that's not. He was like, figure it out. You guys can do this. Like, I believe in you. So my brother and I, so I start nosing around, like, when's the next marketing meeting? Because I like marketing. Like, can I go to those? So that's actually how, believe it or not. So, and this doesn't happen like in normal world. This is where the family business thing comes in, is that's how these things happen. It's not normal. But that's how we ended up in Zamzows, is that we started to nose in and nose around and start to figure things out. And then, of course, once we actually formally decided to join that company, then we were running the two companies together. By then, my father had bought his brother out. And so the company was all underneath the same family umbrella. And from there, it made things a little bit easier for us to maneuver around and, figure things out and create our teams.
Oh my gosh.
I'm a really big hand talker.
I can tell.
Anyway, long story short, we ended up, that's how we ended up where we were. But again, family business. My father is very even Stevens about everything. He wants to make sure everything is equal and
everybody's happy.
Yes. So his big idea was that when we took over Zamzows, we would just be co-CEOs. We'll just put you both in at the top and we'll be good to go.
What's the worst that could happen?
What's the worst that could happen? Exactly. So I almost wish my brother were here right now, so the two of us could be laughing and chuckling about it, because we have had to do a lot of figuring things out, division of labor and things like that.
Yeah. Oh my
very, very challenging to share a position. That is a very challenging thing to do. Keeps dad and mom happy. It's challenging. It's definitely challenging. So
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know where to begin if I had to. So there are a lot of problems, right? Like, you have this whole lifetime of relationship with somebody where you're like, do you remember when you ran me over with your little toy train when I was like 3? And like that comes out at a board meeting or something.
Right.
So you have this whole life of grievance, like Festivus constantly, right? That you have to deal with. But then you also have different, like one business that I actually made content for was this personality test business. It's apparently like crazy now, like millions and millions of people take it. But the idea is that you have you have your different areas of working genius, right? That's what it's called, working genius. And I think a lot of companies have these different things. They're like, oh, you're an introvert, you're this, you're that.
Yes.
But this test is designed to just really say, okay, what's the type of work? Like, forget who you are as a person. What's the type of work where you gain the most energy and enthusiasm, right? So you have the wonderer, which is somebody who thinks of like these atypical random questions that are like, why don't we just do this with paint? And people are like, what? Like, well, think about it. Like, why do we roll it? Why don't we throw it? Like, or something. I don't know, right? And then, so you have the wanderer, you have the inventor, and that's somebody who just can't help but come up with like novel ideas. And they'll keep inventing to their own detriment, even if they don't have a goal, or they'll come up with like, what if we could do this to like spread butter on a piece of toast? They're like, well, what's wrong with a butter knife? They're like, no, I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong, but if we made butter in the shape of toast and torched the top of it, like we could make this, and then you smash it in, like every smash. Like, you don't have to spread anything. Look, I just buttered like 5 pieces of toast. Like, you come up with, I just made that up. So I'm surprised I'm an inventing genius. Right. So you have the wanderer, the inventor, you have the galvanizer, discerner. So wanderer, inventor, discerner. So the discerner is the person who identifies problems with things, but they themselves don't invent things. Okay. So it's like, you come up with an idea. I'm like, I could see that being a problem. Your response, of course, is, okay, well, what do you think we should do? Oh no, I have no idea. Right. So it's like, no, and discerners very classically get on inventors' nerves, because inventors are always coming up with things and discerners always come up with problems for those things. The inventor doesn't want to know about the problems. And when prodded, the inventor knows the discerner can't come up with something better. They just know it's a problem, which is also frustrating because there are real problems, right?
Right.
So you have wanderer, inventor, discerner, you have galvanizer. So that's somebody who really, this is like the group leader who can motivate people, get people moving, and really get people behind a cause. Even if it's not something they really want to do, they're very skilled they're like an incredible people person, right? So you have the galvanizer, you have the enabler, right? So I'm an enabling, inventing genius. So I invent ways to help people. Like, so the enabler is somebody who's like, is constantly thinking of ways like, can I get you another cup of tea? Like, what do you need right now to be like the best you can be? Right? Like that's, do you need a snack? Do you need a date? I have dates. What do you need? You need a shot of something? I got some shots of things, like whatever. And then you have the final one's tenacity. So somebody who like you can give them a to-do list and they live for a list. They're like, I'm going to check every single box off this list. Right. And those are people like the desk is pristine. They are organized and like they can't invent anything. They can't find holes in things. But if you give them tasks, they live for completing tasks and checking boxes. So you have these different things. So it's kind of like you have this lifetime of problems that, you know, everybody's working through with their siblings and their family. And then you have the random potential that you and your brother are like occupy these different areas of genius and are just going to drive each other absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And somehow you didn't.
Right. Well, not yet.
Not yet.
You know, I think it's interesting because my brother and I, we overlap in a lot of ways. We're very, very similar, which also causes its own.
Pull this guy with you. You're leaning back a little bit. Yeah.
Sorry.
There no, you're great. Just,
okay.
There you go.
Yeah. So I think we overlap in some areas. My brother and I have similar personalities in some areas, which causes some conflict because I think both of us really we like to do things ourselves. We like to have our moment in the sun. Yes. And so we have to be really cautious with one another as far as, okay, we can't share this because neither one of us is going to be happy sharing it. But there are areas like marketing that my brother and I both love. So we've had to kind of find these really fine lines and say, okay, let's not step over this. Let's give you room here. Right. And then this is going to be my win. That's going to be your win. And kind of give each other space to do that. And we've had to carve it out ourselves because that's not really in my parents' wheelhouse. They don't want to be messing with that. Like, you two just get along. So we've had to figure it out. And we've done much better as we've gotten older. I think we could just simmer down a little bit and we get better at these things.
Just simmer down.
Yes. But we also have, like, as you're just talking through some of those things, I think I can see the few places that we are different as far as how we execute things. And, you know, my brother definitely has, he can come up with some amazing ideas. He's, you know, big idea guy and lots of them, volumes and volumes and volumes.
Right.
And he's an amazing salesperson. So
that's the worst. I get really worried about this too. Cause I actually realized when I was 22 that, so I went into Cal as a math major and then I switched to rhetoric, which is persuasive language and argument. I really wanted to go to law school and I really fell in love with communication, right? I was really into it. And I actually realized at 22, I remember telling I was on the rowing team. I told my rowing coach this. I was chatting with him after practice one day. I was like, hey, I'm actually kind of worried because I realize that like I'll get into an argument with this girl I was dating. I was like, I'll get into an argument with my girlfriend and I'll know I'm wrong, but I'm so good at arguing that I can get her to admit I'm right. Even though I know where I know where my weakness is and she just couldn't identify it. And like, I overcame all of her arguments. So it's like being a salesperson with an idea person. I always get really worried that like, maybe I'm just making the right sound with my face and the idea isn't actually that good.
Right. I think, and I give my brother huge kudos for self-awareness in this area because he has figured that out. For a long time, it was the source of like the number one frustration between the two of us is that he would have these big ideas and then he would try to sell them to me. And I was able to be like, I can see right through this, Joss. Like, stop. You know, because you can do that with your brother, right? You can like, he can manhandle me down on the floor and wrestle me. Nobody else can do that. But, and sometimes that solves problems too, let's be honest. But anyway, so I think we've gotten better at that part of it of just identifying where we can be, because once I see that he has an idea and he's trying to convince me and I feel that pressure, I can then actually go backwards on the whole thing. And even though it's a great idea, I can actually be worse. Like, I can actually cause more problems because I am now in kind of like a little war with my brother instead of at war with the idea or really trying to figure out what's best for the company. Like, this is what happens in family business. It's stupid, but it happens. So anyway, we can now identify those and we can stop for a second and say, wait a minute, we've hit an impasse here. I'm in my zone, you're in your zone, and we're not, you know, so let's just take a quick break and, you know, we can come back to this. And we've gotten better at that. The other thing that's really helped my brother and I is that we have carved out brother-sister time that we will not allow, no outsiders are allowed to join us, and we cannot talk business. We have to just be brother and sister. And because for a long time,
we actually really like each other.
We do. Believe it or not, we do.
This is like the most wild thing. Like, I'm less impressed with the business and more impressed that you as like two adults are like, we need time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you guys twins?
No, we're
Like,
that boy,
no
that'd be
twin
something.
power?
No twin
Okay.
power. No, my mother's a twin though, so that is a
Maybe
thing.
some bled into you. I don't know.
Maybe
I don't know.
he's I love to say this. He's my older brother. I'm the young one. I'm the youthful, but we're less than 2 years apart, so we're pretty close in age. But nobody makes me laugh like my brother. We grew up together. We have all the stories together. We have all that family history that we watched, and so we can talk to each other. We can't talk literally. There's nobody else on the face of the planet we can talk to about some of the family stuff,
Right.
because either people wouldn't get it or it would probably make us look bad. So we just have to it's got to be between the two of us. So in that sense, it's pretty cool. But yeah, it's there. We have our moments, and things get really intense when you're working through with your sibling on something, way more intense than they probably need to be.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're siblings,
There's all right. So when you're dealing with siblings, like in general, when you're dealing with people, especially my siblings, I've realized it's more of what you can get people to agree to that is the moderator of reality. Right. So if I don't get on with my siblings. I used to. And, as we got older, things just we didn't come from a fantastic, our family imploded kind of when we were younger. And that leads to all kinds of traumas and problems. And as people get older and change, friction and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I've realized is kind of okay, I can absolutely disagree with my siblings, and they can be flat out wrong, like objectively wrong, but that's not the goal. The goal for them is to figure out a way to get me to go along with what they're saying, because then that's reality, right? Like if everybody agrees that A is right, then A is right. Even if objectively B is correct, if everybody agrees that A is the way we're going to view the world, then they win, right? And you fall into those dynamics with siblings at times.
Absolutely.
But the great judge of honesty in the world is always capitalism. It's always business. There's no lying in a long-term format with somebody who's exchanging money with you. So has that been a thing? Has it been all right, I disagree with you, or you disagree with me, but one of us is going to give and let this course take its place, and we're just going to see what the world thinks about this idea?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I think the generation that did that the most was probably my brother, or my father and his brother. They are very different than my brother and I. My brother and I are similar. My father and his brother, very different people, and different takes on life, and different passions, and different expertise. I mean, all across the board. And I think that my dad laughs when people say, how have you been successful? He said, I think we were right about 51% of the time. And that's because they would take a stab at something and they would give it a go, and it would be one brother or the other. And the other one would just have to give and say, okay, we're going to just see how it shakes down. And yeah, I mean, I think things like paint, for instance, didn't work out. I mean, it went for a while, it was okay, but in the long run, that was not what we needed to be for the community. And so yeah, there's a whole slew of things that we did that were probably not the best choices. I could see why the decision was made at the time, and that there was an opportunity there. And then, yeah, the community is the one who kind of straightened us out and said, nah, we're not interested in that. We're not going to be buying that from you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a weird, business is such an odd thing, because it's always your fault. Like if it's your business, it's always your fault. Like for good or for bad, whatever. It's they're in the content world, right? Each piece of content you make is like a tiny, tiny business decision, right? It's its own universe of the way you edit it, where you got it from, the music you put in the background, the zoom in, the bump cuts, the whole thing, right? And then you put it out into the world. And it's really interesting to see people that are attempting to do business in this way by presenting content to the world, and then refusing to take the feedback the world is giving them. Because it's kind of look, if people aren't buying paint, they're just not buying paint. And it's no, they're gonna. Or it's no, it's because we didn't market it well enough. Or no, it's because you mixed the color. It's okay, the people aren't buying paint. And you see this a lot with people that put content out and it doesn't work. And they're well, I'm being shadow banned, or I'm being this, or I'm being that, or this is the problem, or that's the problem. It's that's at the nature of failed businesses, right? That the world is telling you what it thinks, and you're just either unwilling or incapable of hearing it clearly, which is a wild thing to be working through that with somebody like my wife and I. She was a tutor as well, so we were both self-employed for our entire professional careers, and I still am self-employed. And it was interesting going through those types of things with her, because we would have experiences in parallel, and maybe one of us would have the experience first, where, for instance, like you show up to a kid's house to tutor the SAT, and the mom's like, okay, great, I got to go pick up his brother. Like, I'll be right back. And all of a sudden you're there alone with a kid, and you're like, wait, this is not a good policy. You should never be at home alone. And one person might be critical of the other, like, oh, you can't do that. It's like, you don't understand. The situation was a bad situation, right? Like, the mom is going to leave. She's telling me she's leaving. She didn't ask if it was okay. Like, I either leave and piss off this mom and like lose the revenue, or I go through with it and just deal with it. So it's interesting understanding the nature of making those business decisions and dealing with the reality of it, of what you think it should be versus what it is, versus what, like, where the world's going or what the world's telling you. And to be doing that horrendously painful process with somebody so close to you is just, man, I don't, hat off to you.
Well, I don't, and we're only talking about my brother and I at this point. My dad is still fully involved. He's not, he doesn't work in the business anymore, but he is still very heavily involved in the business. He's still a part of, major decisions, and, so we have regular meetings with him, and my mom a little bit on occasion too. She's not usually in the actual running of the business part, but in like the family flow. And as we were working on transitions, she's a huge part of that. So, yeah, there's really 4 of us that are in the mix there. And you're exactly right. I like how your brain works, by the way. I'm just totally following your
good.
Your
I'm glad.
example.
Sometimes
there.
I'm like, have I lost everyone?
Well, at first I was thinking that, but no, I get that. Yeah, I should probably just stop and marvel at it myself for a moment.
Here's something too. You have apparently, as frequently or as successfully as has been necessitated to stay in business, you guys have seen around the corner fast enough or far enough to pivot into a world where you maintain profitability, value, and relevance within the community. What's coming next?
That's a great question. There are quite a few things actually that we're mulling as far as, what's around the river bend. Of course, I'm not going to be sharing that with you.
We're going to cut this episode right now. I got to hear this.
But we definitely, this is something that we actually do, I think, pretty well, is have those conversations about what's around the river bend. What are we aiming towards? What is the latest thing? And is that a Boise thing? Because that's the interesting thing about this valley is there are differences here, and some of the things that have taken off elsewhere just don't take off here. Or for instance, I kind of giggling here that we're on this podcast. For the people in the valley, we're radio people, and radio. I mean, when you look across the United States and probably the whole world, radio's not on the up and up necessarily. Like there's some indicators that perhaps people are turning to other ways of listening to things. The Boise Valley continues, the Treasure Valley continues to listen to radio. Very different than, now it's changing here too, but it's still a viable place for us to communicate with the community because of how this valley is. And then you go to places like Seattle and it's different there.
Oh, yeah. I was actually speaking with some of the people in West Ada recently. And it's like, look, you want to talk to parents, right? Like, and again, nobody in particular at West Ada, just, chatting with, when I go pick up my son, it's like, okay, the district wants to talk to people. If you go to any elementary school, just go 5 minutes before the bell rings. Okay, you look at all the parents standing there.
Oh, yeah.
Are they reading emails? No, they're not really. Like, they're staring at their phones, yes, but they're consuming video content, right? And like, it doesn't even matter if you have audio, because a lot of people consume video with captions and the audio will be completely off. So there's this whole shift towards consumption preferences that there are videos out there actually that I call dual immersion videos. And so imagine this could be a comic bit. Okay. So say you got like a Kevin Hart audio bit, right? And then somebody will take a video of like a really extreme, like first-person shooter video game, somebody playing that, right? So it's incredibly eye-catching. It's incredibly fast. So you're tracking the movements with your eyes, but you're also listening to Kevin Hart. So you're laughing at this. You have the cognitive thing going on with listening to this comic bit, but you're also watching this guy run through this first-person shooter. Or they will literally have two videos side by side. And a lot of times a second video will be an incredibly aesthetically pleasing, like OCD style video where they're like cleaning off a countertop perfectly, or like painting a line on a wall perfectly, or like all kinds of things. They have like glitter videos where they're making these like glitter goo stuff and like pulling it out of a bucket, like scraping it, or like mixing paint. That's a great one where it's kind of like this circle, 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 and then it's like perfectly uniform. And then on that will be one of the videos, it's split screen. And then another video is like, again, a comic bit or something like that. Ali Wong walking around on stage saying ridiculous things, because people can't even, it's not that they don't want to consume just one medium, or excuse me, like you talk about radio. It's almost like if you're only giving one thing, they instantaneously look for something else to consume. Like they have to have an aesthetic aspect to it, right? That's why even if you give them a video, they want captions to the video too. They want to hear it, they want to see the person talking, and they want to follow these different bubbly captions that are moving all over the place. Like the consumption preferences are so wild and unbelievable and changing all the time, right? And interestingly enough, we're actually developing different types of language. Okay. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but my uncle was a communications professor for 40 years. And I was speaking to him, I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? And he's like, you're absolutely right. Okay. If you want to say, like, you want to say something's funny, you're like, oh, that's funny. Or like, oh, you made me laugh. Or, oh, that's humorous. Fine. That's totally fine. But if you look at emojis, how many different emojis are there with somebody laughing?
Oh, man.
And they mean different things, right? Laughing side of the head, laughing here, laughing with your eyes open, eyes closed, right? Like all of these different things. And when you start bringing in acronyms like LOL, LMFAO, like we're actually developing a different shorthand of nuance, right? So like, could you articulate what the laughing with crying with eyes closed and the head tilted, why that's different or how it's nuanced compared to one of the other ones? It's actually really hard to do, but you know when to use it.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. So it's a different, again, pointing to the fact that we can't even articulate using English how these things are different, but we intuitively know they're different. That's the level of shift of communication that we're in the middle of, that people are just going along with and not even thinking about it. Like you could communicate all these things with hieroglyphics. They're just modern day hieroglyphics.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's fascinating when you think about it. I haven't stopped and that was a big deep dive there.
Oh, thanks.
but fascinating. You're exactly right. That's it. Everything is shifting, and it's not as simple as it used to be. That's for sure.
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons why radio, and again, the different places adopt to different trends at different speeds, right? So if the Treasure Valley is still clinging on to like single source or single output consumption of information, like great, no problem, whatever. Right. But it is changing.
Absolutely.
Right. Because I think these things that people are experiencing, like watching two videos at once with captions and all these different things, I think that's actually tapping into different preferences. Like when sugar came on the scene, people were just crazy about it. And then like sugar and fat. And then like they come up with partial hydrogenated soybean oil. And we're all going to die.
Right. Exactly.
Your grandma lived to be 100. Great grandma lived to be 105.
Almost. Yes.
Was she like an avid home gardener? I mean, what was her food consumption like? I'm so curious.
Oh yeah. Very, very, everything fresh. She grew things, she canned things. So she would grow in the garden and then she would preserve them and eat it all winter long. And so, yes, she was absolutely that way. And then she also was we talk about, old wives' tales. She was an old wife with tales. I mean, she had plenty of things. One of my favorite stories is, when she was, it was towards the end. So she was probably 104. And somebody was talking about arthritis and she said, you should eat lots of garlic and lots of onion. And they were like, yeah, well, so wait, you ate a lot of garlic and a lot of onion. She's like, I did. They're like, but you have arthritis. And she was like, well, think about how bad it would have been if I hadn't eaten all that onion and garlic.
She's like, I'm 104. Yeah, I'm not a race car, but I made it to 104, son.
But she had a lot of that kind of stuff. A lot of things that pass through that are still things that the family talks about. And we do. We're very, I think many people, if you know us, you know that we're kind of a nature nutty family. And we sort of try to do things naturally if we can. And
You own garden centers. This is not surprising. It's not like you're Johnson and Johnson.
Right.
Like,
Right.
come on now.
Exactly. Well, we might take it to an extreme. We're a little nutty that way, but yeah, again, what was your question? I forgot what your initial question was.
I mean, again, I think people in the last 30 and 40 years have been in such a rush to like educate the old generation on the right way to live. It's like, oh, grandma, you eat too much bacon, like, because you're not supposed to eat, saturated fat or something. And like, oh, you don't understand. You got to go low carb, or like, you don't understand. You got to get away from like the high protein or the red meat. And it's like, here, this old generation, they like drank, they went through their smoking phases, and they just ate red meat and like simple stuff. They had an incredible variety. This is the other thing. One of the things that comes with somebody who's very intent on gardening is you have like seasonal diet changes, right?
Sure.
Like you eat a lot more fat and stored things in the winter, and you eat a lot more fresh things right out of the garden in the summer. And like things just change naturally.
Absolutely.
And because we have such a supply at Costco, like you get strawberries year round, right? So like you never have variance in your diet now.
Right.
And then we end up having these, horrendous diseases. Then it's like people don't really understand why. And they're like dying a lot younger. And here your grandma's like 105 and eating garlic and onions.
Yeah. Well, and I think the cyclical thing absolutely applies. My grandmother was very cyclical with her eating, but also behavior. We have a natural tendency, our business has a tendency to slow down in the wintertime. Very naturally, a time when we as humans should probably slow down a little bit. So there are things like that flow with the family. I think that has created some longevity as well, in the sense that we do sort of go with Mother Nature, and we sort of, our business follows that. And so, yeah, that's part of it as well, I think.
Yeah. The whole unintentionally affected by Mother Nature, I think a lot of people want to fight that. My dad lived up in Anchorage for 25 years.
Wow.
And man, you have no idea how at the whim of the outside you are until you don't see the sun for days.
Oh, I can't even imagine it.
It's really dark in every way possible.
Very depressing. That would be very hard.
Yeah, it's so weird. And like I have family members that are incredibly affected by seasonal depression. And you just realize it's like, oh, you're not you. You're not you, not necessarily in your behavior, but like you as a person, we like to think of our things as these like autonomous kind of battery operated beings. It's like, no. You are quite literally just a combination of how much sunlight you got today, how much caffeine you've had, and like if you've eaten. You check all three of those things, you're probably going to be more like you.
Right.
You check none of them, you're the devil.
Right. Well, and if you check them, but you nuance them, for instance, you're eating root vegetables in the fall, there are certain nutrients that you're taking in that will help with that.
Right.
So that there's an interesting, if you follow those kind of things, there are some very natural ways that you can feed your body and kind of go with Mother Nature, and you will feel better. That's actually scientific.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, just coming down to the variety of things, like if you had to eat like the ends, right? The nose and tails movement. That's what it is. Tails and nose and tails. What is it? Essentially the movement that people have gotten away from eating the lesser favorable pieces of a beast.
Oh.
So it's like, you want to eat the oxtail. You want to eat like the nose. You want to eat, the organ meat that nobody really wants to eat. Like nobody eats. I tried to make liver like a couple years ago because I was like, of course I go, I'm a gullible guy. No, I'm not gullible. Like, okay, I'm susceptible to suggestion.
Sure. All right.
It's kind of like, why aren't like people used to eat liver and onions all the time, right?
We did every Wednesday when I was growing up.
See, there you go. Like you have lamb fry or something, right? So I go to Whole Foods. I'm like, hey, can I get some? Because Safeway doesn't have liver. I go to Whole Foods.
And also you want chemical-free liver.
Right.
An organic liver is better than one that's been.
Because you're literally eating a sponge out of a cow. Like you're eating the air filter out of this thing.
Bingo.
And like, if this thing was eating trash, you're about to eat a concentration of trash you haven't seen outside of concentrated orange juice.
Exactly.
Like, it's bad. So I'm like, hey, can I get some liver? And the guy looks at me and is like, you want like beef liver? I'm like, well, I mean, like, what are my options? Right. And he's like,
livers,
okay, like, I'll get you some beef liver. Like, what do you want? I was like, oh, can I just get like a liver? He's like, you can't get a liver. He's like, how about I cut you off some liver steaks? I'm like, I'll take a liver steak. Yeah, sure, whatever. No idea what he's talking about. So he turns on his bandsaw and like gets out this frozen hunk of crap and just takes off these. And so I get these giant liver steaks like this. And I'm like, so proud of myself. Yeah. I'm like, I'm doing the liver. Right thing. I'm eating liver. I'm going to be so damn healthy tomorrow morning. Here I come. it tasted so bad.
There's some tricks to that, but yes, it's bad.
Because the recipes and traditions died with the past
Mm.
generation that knew how to prepare liver in a way that was even like slightly tolerable. Like,
Well, and don't you kind of get the feeling though, back then, like they didn't get a lot of joy. I mean, how much joy did you really get back then? You're eating liver. You're going to eat liver, and that's what you're going to eat.
Okay,
and I
but
think it was a little different back then.
but they knew how to make pate.
That's true.
Like they knew how to like boil liver down with garlic and spices in a manner that people pay like $20 for a tiny jar now.
That is true.
And it used to just be their thing. And like, yeah, people have always been miserable.
right.
Like it's only recently that we're like, oh my God,
I
you
can't
should do
do
what
it.
makes you happy. No, you shouldn't, you idiot. Like people have been dying and miserable for like whatever.
right.
Have kids, it'll be fun. No, it's not. It used to just be the only option unless you were going to be a priest. Like,
No kidding.
like you just had kids. It's not even like you wanted them. You just ended up having them.
And lots of them.
Right. Right. My father-in-law is the oldest of 11. Like you just,
Wow.
they just had kids, man. And
Mm.
like you hoped they all made it and you did the best you could. You only knew where half of them were half the time
Yeah.
and the others you never even saw. Like
I
they
was
just moved
laughing with
on.
my husband that when we were kids at 10 o'clock, I think it was, the news, like all the stations would stop and say, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? And like that was a thing. Like, oh shit, no, I don't. I guess I better figure out where my kids are.
Yeah.
Broadcast out to everybody. Just a reminder,
know where
you
your
have
kids are?
children. Are you aware of where they are? Yeah.
Could you imagine that now?
No.
Now it's like you need to let your kids out of the house.
It's 10 o'clock. Have you kicked your kids out of the house yet?
Have your kids seen the rays of light coming from the glowing orb yet today? No, maybe draw them, pull the
It's
blinds
time.
up. Yeah. But I mean, again, so there are a lot of politic things going on right now. And one of them is about, what do we do with school safety and talking to a lot of the representatives and then people in the community. There's always the question of like, okay, look, has the world always been filled with sharp corners and danger and we just didn't pay attention to it as much? Or is it uniquely dangerous now? And I think the bottom line is just like you're pointing out, it's like the world has always been dangerous.
Yeah.
Like we've always had bad people. We just consume really scary things all the time now. Those are things that get upregulated. Like all you got to do is put out a warning, like warning, there's a kidnapper in your neighborhood. Like that piece of content would like go viral.
Right.
Like everybody would watch it because they want to. And now they're constantly thinking about the kidnapper in the neighborhood. Whereas before there was probably always a kidnapper in the neighborhood. You didn't even know where your kids were. You just running around ignorant.
Yeah. I do remember as a kid, though, they would have warnings and my mother would pull us inside. Come in, kids. There's a kidnapper. Really? Where? Things were so different back then. I do remember like we would leave in the morning and we wouldn't come home until it was dark. Like we would just be out on a lamb, Things were vastly different back then.
Yeah.
Things
And
have
even
changed.
my dad brought up a funny point. He's done some traveling. I haven't really traveled the world much, but I've been to like Ireland and like that. I was there for a wedding. That was it. It was a wild time. But like he's been to Singapore and Vietnam. He was in Vietnam as in military when he was like 18, 19. He flew helicopters. So he went back and did kind of a tour through Vietnam. And he was like, people in Vietnam, like people get so freaked out about seatbelts in here. It's like in Vietnam, you'll have like a full family on a scooter. It's like babies, mom, dad, like the scooter's just 50 cc's hauling down the street. And I was like, yeah, yeah, right. It was like, okay, probably, but you also probably don't have like the mom who had half a bottle of Chardonnay at lunch on her cell phone and like some battering ram of a vehicle going 80 down this neighborhood street.
Right.
Like you have different cultural trends here that necessitate more caution than you would in Vietnam, I suppose.
Right. But it's all dangerous. Like, right. Right. It hasn't, that's what your point is. It is probably always been dangerous. It's just a new flavor. There's different flavors that we get as we go along, right? We're shifting things up a little bit.
Right. Plus there was no way to entertain your kids in the house back in the day.
Right.
Right. Like, yeah, you had TV, but it's not like it was high quality TV. And
only a few channels and yeah.
Right. And you had to have it blaring.
Right.
Like, of course, like get out of the house, man. Go do something.
I mean, even the video games, you could only play Pong that long before you're like, I'm out. I can't do any more of this.
No. You know what's we actually have gone through this large transition. Do you have little kids?
I have an older kid.
Oh, older kid.
Yeah, she's almost 17.
Oh, okay, awesome. Well, she's stuck on her phone then too.
She is.
Like, there are a lot of risks there. We'll have to talk about that later. But we actually took all of our kids' iPads away. And iPads weren't a thing in our house before COVID, and then they had to have them for like remote class.
Yeah.
And then they became like this fixture in our house because all of our kids' friends were talking about the games they were playing, and they were trying to interact with their friends, so we had to let them. Anyway, so it just became this fixture. But my wife and I were like, okay, we need to find single purchase video games that have like a very specific end date.
Yeah.
Like these are the only things. So we started collecting old gaming consoles. So like Nintendo Wii's or like original Xboxes, and getting these old games that was like, no, you used to just pay once. It was like $19 and you got it at GameStop, and like this was the game, and the game never asked anything else from you because it already got your $19.
Right.
And you're going to play it until it's over. And then it would like unlock, you could play the game again, and it made it like slightly harder, and you'd beat like the master levels, but like you just play this dumb game, and you were self-regulating because the games weren't actually that great.
Right.
Like they were marginally better than sitting on the couch watching TV, right? So like you played the games, but if anything enticing came up outside, you'd like run outside because you were bored with the game. You just had nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's totally true.
God bless. I have no idea how we got here talking about
I don't
this.
either, but I love it. It's kind of nostalgic.
Oh my God, good. Listen, we've been talking for like well over an hour. I gotta let you go. I feel like we're gonna have to do round 2 and 3 because I feel like we just scratched the surface of Zamzows.
I would love it. This has been very fun.
Good. I really appreciate you coming in. Again, I've been a customer for a long time now, since I moved here, and I really like your store. I really like the way it feels when I go in there. It's not. I mean, like a lot of garden centers, to be honest, they're just so sterilized. It's always the concrete floor and like a completely disinterested random person wandering around. And every time I go in, the people I talk to, I enjoy. There's a warmth to the store and the product line. I love the birds and stuff. It's fantastic. So
well, we have an amazing group of people that work for us, and they are as passionate as you are. They love the business, and they love to be a part of it, and they're really the ones, like they're the face of the whole company. They're the ones that are talking to everybody and answering all the questions and taking the trainings and trying to understand everything so that they can help people. And they really are the lifeblood of the business. So I'm glad to hear you say that. I will either pass this on to them, or I will have them play. Like, you should listen to this. I'll tell them.
We'll rip some clips.
Perfect.
There you go. Anyway, thank you for coming in. I'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by MTU Studios. If you're looking to start a podcast or need content for your business or personal use, content of any type, please reach out to MTU Studios. MTUstudios.com. We'd love to help.